The very tools you currently use to protect your energy, safeguard your peace, and curate your self-awareness might actually be a sophisticated disguise for the modern version of cowardice.
Which is a terrifying thought to start with.
I mean, it really is. Today, we are dismantling the modern illusion of self-care. We will explore how chronic avoidance systematically shrinks your personal power.
And we will uncover why highly intelligent people frequently become strangely powerless in their own lives.
We are taking you on a journey to understand how the relentless pursuit of comfort might be orchestrating the quiet suffocation of your potential.
Because historically, we defined cowardice through very stark physical terms. We pictured a soldier fleeing a battlefield.
The image is incredibly visceral. It involves immediate danger, a clear enemy, and a blatant abandonment of duty.
But today, cowardice looks entirely different. It operates in the shadows of our daily routines.
It looks like leaving a message unread for 3 days because you claim you lack the emotional bandwidth to answer.
Or watching the social media stories of friends you no longer have the courage to actually contact.
I mean, it looks like avoiding difficult conversations while pretending to be emotionally evolved.
The battlefield has fundamentally shifted from physical terrain to the internal landscape of the nervous system. We are no longer running from advancing armies.
We are running from the slightest hint of emotional discomfort.
We are. The tragedy of this shift is that we are fleeing under the guise of being enlightened. We engage in endless research, planning, optimizing, journaling.
We frame these activities to ourselves and to everyone else as necessary precursors to action.
But they are frequently just sophisticated methods of procrastination. Cowardice today arrives wearing the comforting mask of self-care.
We have successfully rebranded fear as wisdom.
And in doing so, we have completely masked the damage we're doing to our own capacity to live fully.
We have reframed avoidance as a virtue. Cowardice is rarely a sudden, dramatic destruction of your life, you know. It does not arrive with a thunderclap.
It is a polite, quiet, almost imperceptible shrinking of your reality.
People are transforming into what we might call the modern hobbit.
The modern hobbit. I like that phrase.
Well, think about it. They retreat into bedrooms fortified with emotional pillows, weighted blankets, noise-canceling headphones, and endless productivity apps.
Consider the design of those tools, though. They're explicitly created to eliminate friction.
They avoid discomfort rather than promote growth. We must ask you a brutal, illuminating question. Are you healing or are you hiding?
That distinction between healing and hiding is the absolute crux of the modern psychological crisis. There's a profound difference between recovery and retreat.
How do you mean?
Well, when we analyze the modern infrastructure surrounding us, we see a system that actively encourages this permanent retreat. Think about the digital environments we inhabit.
Algorithms disproportionately reward observation over participation.
They do. You can spend hours watching other people live, build, create, and fail. This creates a false neurological sense of involvement.
Your brain feels engaged.
But you are never actually risking your own ego or your own safety. Furthermore, remote lifestyles effectively eliminate all daily friction.
You can work, eat, and entertain yourself without ever encountering unpredictability.
Or a stranger's opposing viewpoint. These structures accidentally reward isolation. They create a dangerous, almost invisible confusion between protecting yourself and imprisoning yourself.
The line between achieving genuine peace and slipping into mere stagnation vanishes entirely.
You begin to believe that preserving your energy is the ultimate goal, ignoring the fact that human energy is meant to be expended on the friction of living.
I am struggling to locate that exact line between a healthy boundary and this modern cowardice we're discussing.
It is a difficult line to find.
I mean, if I decline a social invitation because I am genuinely exhausted from a difficult week, am I practicing vital self-care or am I slowly building a self-imposed prison?
That is the ultimate question.
Consider the analogy of a medieval fortress. Initially, you build the walls to keep genuine threats out. The fortress serves a vital protective function during a period of intense vulnerability.
You pull up the drawbridge to heal from a severe injury or a trauma.
But at what point does that boundary become a trap?
The transition from boundary to prison happens when the mechanism of defense becomes your permanent residence. Using your fortress analogy, eventually the heavy wooden doors rust shut.
The massive iron gears controlling the drawbridge fuse together from lack of use.
The very structure that saved you during a crisis now functions to keep you permanently locked inside during times of peace. You are perfectly safe.
But your potential is suffocating in the dark.
You are completely isolated from the terrifying, unpredictable beauty of the world outside. The boundary that was meant to protect your life has become a substitute for your life.
The walls of your modern fortress are constructed from delayed decisions, ignored conversations, and canceled plans.
Every small act of avoidance removes a tiny fraction of your personal power. Every delayed decision weakens your ability to trust yourself.
Every ignored conversation teaches your nervous system that retreat is safer than confrontation.
You convince yourself that protecting your peace is paramount, while your tolerance for uncertainty becomes smaller and smaller.
Remaining locked inside that fortress does not merely pause your life. It seems it actively rewires your biology and your identity.
It absolutely does.
Human beings become what they repeatedly rehearse. If you repeatedly rehearse hesitation, withdrawal, silence, and escape, your nervous system must begin to interpret life itself as inherently dangerous.
That biological rewiring is the silent engine of this crisis. Rehearsing avoidance creates a catastrophic collapse of the internal discomfort threshold.
If you never face friction, your brain forgets how to process friction.
This biological reality explains a fascinating and tragic phenomenon we see constantly in modern society. We observe individuals who possess immense intelligence,
People who know every mindset framework, optimization strategy, and productivity trick.
yet they remain entirely frozen when life demands action. They possess an encyclopedic knowledge of how to live, but they are incapable of actually living.
We define this specifically as intellectual cowardice.
It is the phenomenon of analyzing everything while executing nothing. Knowledge without confrontation creates a false, seductive sense of progress,
You consume endless podcasts, articles, and content about transformation.
mistaking the consumption of information for the act of transformation itself.
The consumption becomes the disguise. You feel productive because you're reading about courage, but your nervous system remains completely unexposed to risk.
Furthermore, we must factor in the biological state of the modern individual. Exhaustion magnifies fear.
A biologically depleted nervous system, ravaged by digital addiction, overstimulation, and burnout, loses its baseline resilience.
A weak nervous system interprets completely normal life challenges as literal existential threats. A difficult email, a socially awkward moment.
A minor rejection.
Your body responds to a calendar invite the same way our ancient ancestors responded to a physical predator in the wild.
The amygdala cannot differentiate between the threat of a tiger and the spread of public criticism when the baseline capacity for stress has been eroded by constant comfort.
We are treating a paper cut like a mortal wound because our psychological immune system has been compromised by extreme, curated comfort.
This leads to a fascinating realization about how people try to escape this trap. People waste entire decades waiting for a feeling of readiness before they act.
They analyze their fear, hoping to dismantle it through pure intellect.
They treat confidence like a software update they can simply download by reading another self-improvement book.
Confidence is not a software update.
Confidence is a receipt. Think about a physical transaction at a store. You do not get the receipt before you pay.
You get the receipt only after you have handed over the currency.
Confidence is the accumulated proof and evidence you receive only after completing a transaction with courage.
You only get the receipt after surviving a difficult conversation, taking a massive risk, or enduring public embarrassment and realizing the world kept spinning.
You cannot read your way into confidence. You must purchase it with action.
That requirement for action is precisely what intellectual cowardice attempts to bypass entirely. A coward waits to feel ready.
A courageous person acts before certainty arrives.
Confidence is accumulated proof that uncertainty will not kill you. When your internal threshold for discomfort collapses because you refuse to act, your world compresses.
It compresses into predictable routines designed exclusively to eliminate emotional danger.
You mistake familiarity for happiness. You assume that because your routine is predictable and free of emotional danger, you are thriving.
Safety and aliveness are not the same thing.
Courage expands reality. Every courageous act increases your range. Your world becomes larger because your capacity to handle the world becomes larger.
Because confidence cannot be acquired through thinking, we must examine the only viable alternative. You must fundamentally rebuild your relationship with discomfort.
We need to look at courage as a physiological adaptation. Courage is simply a muscle.
Like every muscle in the human body, it atrophies when left unused in a comfortable environment.
We often misunderstand courage as fearlessness.
Courage does not mean fearlessness. It means the willingness to move forward while fear is still actively present in your mind and body.
The people you admire are rarely fearless geniuses. They simply developed a higher tolerance for uncertainty, rejection, and emotional exposure.
They were willing to look stupid temporarily in order to grow permanently.
This brings us to a profound modern paradox. People desperately desire transformation.
They crave confidence, reinvention, meaning, and freedom.
Simultaneously, they organize their entire lives to avoid the exact emotional conditions required to achieve that transformation.
They demand confidence without ever facing rejection.
They want reinvention without experiencing the terror of uncertainty. They seek profound meaning without any personal sacrifice.
And they want absolute freedom without stepping into chaos.
Growth has always been slightly violent to the identity. The old version of a person rarely leaves quietly.
You cannot become a new, expansive version of yourself while clinging desperately to the comfort of your current limitations.
Shedding an old identity requires a grieving process, and it requires stepping into the unknown, which is inherently terrifying.
That intense desire for comfort often masks itself as having impossibly high standards. Let us examine perfectionism.
Perfectionism is rarely about excellence. It is merely hidden cowardice.
It is a sophisticated, socially acceptable way to postpone risking or loving because anything less than extraordinary is deemed a failure.
If you convince yourself that your novel must be a masterpiece before anyone reads it, you never have to publish it.
Therefore, you never have to face criticism.
If you demand a perfect relationship, you never have to risk the vulnerability of a real flawed partnership.
To counter this hidden cowardice, we must intentionally introduce randomness and chaos into life. Chaos is not always destruction.
Sometimes, chaos is exposure therapy for the soul.
Breaking routines before they become prisons, speaking to strangers, attempting things you were terrible at.
Traveling to unfamiliar places without an itinerary. These actions actively rebuild the emotional immune system.
They force you out of the curated environment and back into the friction of reality.
People who never experience randomness become incredibly fragile over time.
The smallest disruption feels catastrophic because they forgot that human beings evolved through uncertainty, not comfort.
Personal power relies entirely on gathering evidence of survival. To gather this vital evidence, you must commit fully to one meaningful pursuit despite the risk of failure.
Scattered people become weak people. Fragmented attention creates a fragmented identity.
When you refuse to commit, you leave life permanently open-ended because closing doors creates responsibility. Indecision is simply fear wearing intellectual clothing.
Extreme focus forces a direct confrontation with resistance, insecurity, boredom, and the possibility of failure.
Paradoxically, this intense, unavoidable confrontation is exactly what restores your personal power.
Personal power does not come from a perfectly curated environment. It comes from undeniable, lived evidence that you can adapt to chaos and survive the friction of the world.
I completely agree.
Let us examine a potential root cause for this lack of capacity. I want to question our modern relationship with the concept of meaning.
Meaning is a complicated topic.
It is. We see an obsession with finding meaning, but look at the daily reality for most individuals. Does engaging in meaningless work actively drain the exact emotional energy required for courageous action?
People spend years building lives and careers their nervous systems quietly hate.
A person exhausted by the emptiness of their daily existence will naturally retreat into passive distractions.
The meaningless work forces them into the fortress simply to recover their baseline sanity. They spend their evenings consuming digital dopamine just to numb the profound dissatisfaction of their day.
This leaves absolutely zero surplus emotional energy for the violent, necessary act of transformation we discussed earlier.
The connection between meaningless work and cowardice is profound and often entirely overlooked. Disconnecting from meaning causes severe psychological decay.
Human beings possess a remarkable capacity to endure extraordinary difficulty, suffering, and discomfort when a clear sense of meaning exists.
We can survive immense physical and emotional pain if we believe it serves a higher purpose or a deeply held value.
However, when meaning is absent from your daily actions, the emotional energy required for courage simply evaporates.
You are left with a depleted nervous system that interprets any additional demand as an unbearable threat.
If your day job drains your soul, simply choosing a restaurant for dinner can feel overwhelming.
Rebuilding your capacity for courage requires physiological intervention as much as psychological intervention.
You must rebuild your biological foundation before you can attempt philosophical bravery.
You must reduce dopamine overload, engage in real, unpredictable conversations instead of solely curated digital interactions.
And cease consuming endless negativity disguised as vital information.
Courage often begins physiologically. You must move toward aliveness, toward work and pursuits that generate energy rather than consume your soul.
Human potential is rarely destroyed by spectacular failure. Most lives do not collapse because people tried something audacious, stumbled, and failed publicly on a grand stage.
Lives collapse quietly.
They collapse because people permanently delay becoming who they could have been. We have replaced the vital pursuit of a vibrant, expansive life with the careful, anxious management of a shrinking, predictable reality.
We mistake the absence of pain for the presence of life.
We curate our environment so perfectly, filtering out every dissenting voice and every minor inconvenience, that we forget how to handle the rough edges of human existence.
Safety and aliveness are fundamentally different states of being, and we have sacrificed the latter entirely on the altar of the former.
Consider a new, ultimate definition of cowardice for you to carry forward today.
What if true cowardice is not the physiological experience of fear itself? Fear is a natural biological response?
What if true cowardice is the tragedy of repeatedly betraying your own potential in exchange for temporary emotional safety?
Every single time you choose retreat over confrontation. Every time you choose silence over expression.
Every time you choose the endless scroll over the difficult conversation, you abandon a version of yourself that could have existed.
At the end of life, people rarely regret being too courageous. They rarely regret the moments they stepped into the unknown and failed.
They regret all the versions of themselves they abandoned simply to maintain an illusion of security.
That is the true cost of hiding.
I challenge you to examine your daily routines today. Look closely at the boundaries you have drawn around your life and the comforts you fiercely protect.
Think about the text messages you leave unread.
The conversations you constantly postpone and the projects you research infinitely but never begin.
Ask yourself which version of yourself you might be abandoning today simply to avoid a momentary flash of discomfort.
The world outside your fortress is unpredictable, terrifying, and chaotic, but it is the only place where you can actually live.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Deep Thoughts Podcast. I hope you found insights and inspiration to take with you on your journey of self-growth. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to follow us on social media to stay updated on new releases and exclusive content. See you next time, where we'll continue to help you grow and explore your full potential.